Hey there, it's Leona. Welcome to Zen Mindfulness Shodo. Today, we are going to practice Shodo meditation while focusing on the Kanji character for enter. So, let's begin our beautiful journey together. When you write a character, imagine a square about the size of the character that you are going to write like this. First, I'm going to write it. Then I'm going to explain the points and tips for writing the character beautifully in detail. Now I'm gonna explain detail the points and tips for writing this character beautifully. The first stroke starts from a point, a bit lower than the center point of the top left square, or slightly to the right of that. Place the brush at about a 45-degree angle while holding it straight up. Before moving the brush, lightly push the brush towards the tip of it and stabilize the brush. After you stabilize the brush, at about 45 to 60 degrees, it scoops downward to the left, while curving down and getting thinner. The end point is a little bit lower than the center point of the bottom left square, so the length is about that long. Another guideline for length is that when you write the second stroke, the space below the end point of the first stroke, and the space above the highest point of the second stroke look almost the same size. Then the character is vertically centered in the square box, so it will appear more balanced. This is just my opinion, but this character looks more balanced and stable when written in a slightly wider rectangular shape rather than a perfect square. Therefore, instead of filling up the square box completely, leave a little bit of space at the top and bottom, makes it look neater. These guidelines are merely for practice purposes to help you eventually write on blank paper while maintaining this angle of the lines, ratio of lengths, and overall character shape without distorting them too much. So don't worry about the small details. Just practice writing with the aim of achieving closer to this character shape. From the end point of the first stroke, the brush moves upward in this kind of motion. And the second stroke starts from a point, a bit to the left of the center point of the top left square, or slightly higher. Place the brush at about a 45-degree angle while holding it straight up. Lightly touch only the tip of the brush to the paper. Then, like the starting point of the first stroke, lightly push the brush towards the tip of it and stabilize the brush. After you stabilize the brush, it moves to the right, or it moves upward to the right. Just a little bit, at about a 45-degree angle. It moves downward to the right. It touches the beginning point of the first stroke along the way, and it gets thicker as it moves downward to the right. This line can be a slightly curved line going downwards or upwards, or even a straight line. As long as it connects smoothly to the starting point of the first stroke, the character will look neat. So feel free to make this part of the stroke in whichever way you prefer. When it reaches almost the same height as the end point of the first stroke, it lightly stops there for a second and checks to the right. Gradually lift the brush from the paper while moving to the right, like the last part of the character people or 8. The tip of the brush leaves the paper last, as you make this pointy part on the right. Since this character enter consists of 2 strokes, the key points to writing it in a well-balanced and neat way are the angle of the 2 lines, the connection points, and the height of the 2 ending points. First, let's talk about the angle. I think the angle of the second stroke has a bigger impact on the overall impression of the character. Let me write some examples here. These might not be the best examples, but in the one on the left, the angle of the second stroke is slightly closer to the middle vertical line compared to the second stroke of the sample character, around 60 degrees. But looking at it, it also appears to be around 45 degrees. Let me write another example. the angle of the second stroke here is around 60 degrees, isn't it? Compared to the sample character, which is around 45 degrees. This one appears to be at a slightly steeper angle, closer to the middle vertical line. In this example, the angle of the first stroke is also around 60 degrees. I intentionally wrote it at a slightly steeper angle so that it doesn't touch the character on the left. However, when written this way, the space between the two strokes becomes narrow. Looking just at this space, it gives a cramped impression. When the angle of the strokes gets closer to the middle vertical line, the overall character becomes slender and takes on a tall, skinny rectangular shape. Compared to the shape of the sample character, it looks less stable due to becoming thinner. The example on the left shows the angle of the second stroke brought closer to the middle horizontal line. Compared to the sample character's angle, the angle is around 30 degrees. By making the angle of the second stroke more horizontal like this, the overall character looks more stable, and the space between the two strokes also appears wider. However, when written this way, it ends up becoming a wider rectangular shape instead. You might not notice it much when looking at it individually, but compared to the sample character, it appears a wider or tall skinny rectangular shape like the example on the right. Still, if you prefer this example's wider or tall skinny shape over the shape of the sample character, then please feel free to practice writing it this way. Of course, if you prefer the shape of the sample character, then please practice writing it like this. The next point is about the height of the connection points. Let me write some examples here. In the sample character, for example, if this is around the middle of the second stroke, the connection point is a bit higher than the middle of the second stroke. In this example, if around here is the middle of the second stroke, the connection point appears higher than the connection point of the sample character. When I'm editing the video now, I noticed that this example is not a very good one. So, it might appear similar in shape to the sample character. But the point that I wanted to make is that if the connection point becomes too high compared to the sample character, it will no longer look like the kanji character to enter. When we look at the character from a distance, it might resemble the kanji character for person or people. So please be careful not to make the height of the connection point too high. In the example on the right, if this is around the middle of the second stroke, the connection point with the first stroke is lower than that. If you write it like this space becomes smaller. Then the part higher than the connection point of the second stroke becomes longer. And it might even look like a dinosaur or giraffe with a long neck. With this shape, the overall balance of the character doesn't look very good. So try not to make the connection point too low either. But this is just my opinion, so if you prefer the way this character looks in these examples over the sample character, please feel free to practice writing it this way. The last point is about the height of the endpoints. If the second stroke looks like this, or end up looking like this, the overall balance of the character doesn't look very good, since the endpoint of the second stroke is higher than the endpoint of the first stroke. It looks like only the endpoint of the first stroke is touching the ground, and the entire character is being supported by just that one point. So the overall character appears unstable and lacking balance. On the other hand, in the example on the right, since the endpoint of the second stroke is lower than the endpoint of the first stroke, the entire character appears to be pulled down towards the bottom right, making the bottom right portion look heavy. when you write this character like this, only one endpoint is touching the ground, so the overall character lacks stability and balance. So, compared to these two examples, this sample character where the endpoints of the two strokes are written around the same height appears more stable and balanced. Taking into account the tips and points that I've explained so far, how about practicing writing the character in your preferred style? The key points and tips for writing kanji beautifully, as explained in the video, are concisely summarized in this book. Additionally, easily understandable Zen mindsets and philosophical messages are shared in this book, for those who want to practice directly in this book. I've also prepared a workbook. The writing tips and techniques are the same as in the Zen Mindfulness Shodo book. Each page allows you to practice one character. If you're interested, please see the description. When you practice with a brush, I recommend that you place a few pieces of paper under the page that you're writing on, so that the ink doesn't bleed onto the page under it. Alright, let's get started. Before you start writing, take a deep breath and clear your mind. Slowly breathe in as much air as you can through your nose. And exhale all the negative emotions that you've been holding until this moment through your mouth. When you're mentally ready to write, you can start writing. Check the starting point, ending point, the angle of the stroke, and direction of the curve. After that, without hesitation, aim for the end point and move the brush smoothly. Try to write slower than you normally write, putting your heart and soul into each stroke. However, if you move the brush too slowly, the ink will bleed and the lines will become thicker in areas where you don't want them to be thicker. And if you move the brush too quickly, the ink will fade and the lines will become thinner in areas where you don't want them to be thinner. Or the ink will disappear midway through, making the strokes shorter than you want them to be. So, concentrate on finding the right speed. Once you've finished writing the character, look at the character as a whole and think about what changes you should make next in order to make it look even more beautiful. Of course, you don't have to take all the tips and points that I've told you and copy my way of writing the character. Trust your own sense of beauty and adjust accordingly. It's important that you're satisfied with the shapes of the character that you write. So, please use my tips and points as ideas and hints for adjusting the shape of the character to your sense of beauty. Of course, you can't change the shape so much that it no longer looks like a character. If you notice that you're thinking about something else while writing, immediately refocus on what you're writing. By repeating this exercise, you'll be able to notice when your attention starts to turn to something unrelated to a current action and gradually improve your concentration and self-control. You can also build your patience with this practice. So, let's practice together. It's just natural that we are unable to create perfectly satisfying strokes every time. Instead of blaming yourself for not being able to make strokes that you want, try praising yourself for taking on difficult challenges. Alright, let's practice together again in my next video. Thank you for watching.